Mtembei constituency in Mtembei County. Leader of majority, you may proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and let me also join the Honorable Kaluma to take my seat to allow him to, I guessed he wanted to welcome his students in the school, that school from Mtembei and also the one from Igembe and the other school from Tabaj in Wajir County. I also take this opportunity to welcome them to the National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second this bill, and I was saying let me begin by thanking the chair of JLAC and the chair of Finance Committee in absentia, who were led the two committees in considering this bill when it came to the House for consideration. Honorable Speaker, as the chair has ably moved, and let me thank him, I was seated in my office attending to other matters when you called me out to move, but I knew the Honorable Murugara was in hand. We had agreed if I am late in the office, he can move for me and I will second for him. And if I moved, he would second for me, because this bill, him and his committee and that of finance were able to look at it. And Honorable Speaker, as he has said, this bill seeks to attend to gaps, legal gaps in our Anti-Money Laundering Act, our Counter-Terrorism Financing Act. And these are the two acts of Parliament, Honorable Speaker, that we passed. One in 2009, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act that we passed in 2009. And December 2009 and came into operation in 2010, June, together with the Prevention of Terrorism Act that again was enacted in 2012, October of 2012. These two acts, Honorable Speaker, are the architecture around the financing of terrorism and how we counter money laundering and proceeds of crime in this country. And Honorable Speaker, Kenya is amongst the League of Nations that are member states of the Financial Action Task Force, which is a global body that is mandated to set global standards to promote the effective implementation of legal, regulatory, and operational measures to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, and even the financing of against the proliferation of small arms and weapons of mass destruction. Honorable Speaker, this task force is charged with that responsibility to ensure that the global financial system is secure and criminals do not use our financial systems to launder money that is proceeds of crime or that is going to finance the production or mass distribution of weapons of mass destruction or even financing terrorism. Honorable Speaker, it also speaks to people who launder money, corruption money. And in a country like ours and many other African states, Honorable Speaker, a lot has been said about fighting corruption, Honorable Speaker. And we have always said that you cannot fight corruption by just speaking without action. And part of the action, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that states and governments are able to follow up proceeds of crime like corruption right to where those who obtain money corruptly from public coffers take their money. And whether you move your money from a country like Kenya to the United States, to South Africa, to Dubai, that the financial system globally is able to track this money and ensure that proceeds of crime, whether it's corruption, whether it's money, whether it's drug trafficking, whether it's the proliferation of arms or even terrorism financing, there is no safe haven anywhere in the world for proceeds of crime, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, there are gaps that this task force usually identifies through their peer reviews, and Kenya again has been subjected to these peer reviews. And over time, Honorable Speaker, I think is in the year 2021, 2022 is the last time that Kenya went through its second anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing mutual evaluation, which, as I said, is a peer review among states in Eastern, Southern Africa that have a body that they call the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group, or SAAMLG. And this regional anti-money laundering body, Honorable Speaker, conducts a peer review amongst the member states. And Kenya, being a member state of this body, had our peer review done in the year 2022. And there are certain gaps that were identified, Honorable Speaker. And it is those gaps that this bill now seeks to address. Honorable Speaker, if you allow me just to go through some of those gaps that were identified, or the deficiencies that were picked up during the mutual evaluation report for Kenya, and indeed they identified certain major deficiencies that need to be addressed through legal reforms, and it is those deficiencies that this bill now seeks to address. Honorable Speaker, the first item was that proceeds of crime and anti-money laundering, the POCAMLA Act, or the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, only contains anti-money laundering requirements and does not cover the combating of terrorism financing. Therefore, there's a gap where we have a law that deals with only issues to do with anti-money laundering, but does not adequately cover the counter-terrorism financing or combating of terrorism financing. And therefore, in a region like ours where we have had incidents of terrorism, it becomes very crucial that we have measures, adequate legal safeguards to ensure that we're also combating terrorism financing. And those are some of the issues that the chair was mentioning that this bill now seeks to address. It also identifies that Kenya does not have a range of proportionate and dissuasive civil and administrative sanctions for dealing with natural or legal persons that fail to comply with anti-money laundering or combating the financing of terrorism requirements, or non-compliance with AML or the CFT obligations. AML being the anti-money laundering and CFT being the combating of terrorism financing. And Honorable Speaker, if you don't have a range of proportionate and dissuasive civil and administrative sanctions against companies, because those are the items that are referred to as natural and legal persons. Legal persons being legal persons like companies. If you don't have adequate sanctions in our laws, then it means somebody can steal money, launder that money through companies that cannot be sanctioned. And therefore, this bill is seeking to have adequate sanctions both of natural persons and even legal entities like registered companies, whether they are limited or non-limited companies, Honorable Speaker. It was also noted, Honorable Speaker, that there are no provisions which makes money laundering and terrorism financing as extraditable offenses. And therefore, you can commit a crime on counter-terrorism financing or combating terrorism financing in Kenya. You could be accused of anti-money laundering crimes in Kenya, and you take off to another country, but because it is not classified, those crimes are not classified as extraditable offenses, then you find people who have stolen from this country. And there are case examples, Honorable Speaker. If you remember the owners of companies like Triton, when they cleaned off money from this country through the Triton energy scandal, those people are able to get out of this country and live happily thereafter in other countries. But now, having laundered money out of this country, and there are many other examples that you could cite, where people have stolen money, obtained money corruptly in this country, but because the crimes of money laundering and combating terrorism financing are not classified as extraditable offenses, then you are not able to extradite those people back to this country to be charged. Yet we have seen in other jurisdictions, like the case example of the former MD of KPLC and former energy minister, being sought in the British Islands to be charged on crimes that relate to obtaining money through corruption. But we could not do the same for us. Now, with this new bill, we'll be able to classify crimes around money laundering and combating of terrorism financing as extraditable offenses and be able to extradite people who commit such crimes in this country. Honorable Speaker, there was also a legal gap in the country, in Kenya, in relation to terrorism financing, and this is impeding the country's efforts to fighting terrorism financing. This legal gap in relation to terrorism financing is also impacting the terrorism financing preventative measures. And as I said, Honorable Speaker, with the threats around Al-Shabaab in northern Kenya and other parts of the country, like in Lamu and other parts where, even in Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, we have been victims of terrorism. And if we are not able to have adequate legal safeguards to ensure that those who finance terrorism can be apprehended and charged, we have seen people being charged and easily walk out of court having been accused of financing terrorism and having maimed and killed Kenyans. I think with the passage of this bill, Honorable Speaker, again, this will be a thing of the past. We will now be able to track money, whether it is money from piracy, whether it is money that has come from organizations that are financing terrorism. You'll be able to track all that money and be able to arrest and charge before courts of law people who are in any way involved in the financing of terrorism in this country or even elsewhere, therefore making our country not a safe haven, but a very unsafe place for terrorists and those who finance the terrorists. Honorable Speaker, it was also noted during this peer review that the country does not have mechanisms for simplified mutual legal assistance or simplified extradition, and those are the issues Honorable Murugara was speaking to, including the issues that he spoke to that were challenged in court by the Law Society of Kenya and other bodies, which, as the chair has ably stated, following an out-of-court settlement between the Law Society of Kenya, the Office of the Attorney General, that has now been settled, and this is why we have this law now here. Honorable Speaker, the other gap was around virtual assets and virtual asset service providers that are not limited, and the country has not put in place regulatory frameworks around the virtual asset service providers. And therefore, if all these virtual asset service providers, Honorable Speaker, are not covered under our laws, and we have a live case today, which I'm happy the member who has just walked in, Honorable Irene Mayaka, is among the members who have been nominated by the ICT committee, together with the chair, ICT, to deal with these virtual asset providers. I hear someone saying there is no ICT, whether you call it ICT or CIIT or CII. There is a committee that the chair is the Honorable KJ. And I was saying, without the virtual asset service providers having a clear framework on how they will be dealt with. These are the cases of WorldCoin, and that's why I'm saying we have a live case today where these virtual asset providers are not prohibited, and the country has not put in place a regulatory framework that will deal with all these VASPs. Thank you, whoever served me the water.
Yeah, I can give you an opportunity to appreciate her. I watched her kindness.
That must be Honorable Jamatia, the member for Baringo. And you know, ladies from Baringo are usually very good people. And you can see she noticed that I was struggling, my throat was getting dry. And thank you, Honorable Jamatia, the very able county MP for Baringo County, and a future governor, future first female governor of Baringo County. That tells Irene Mayaka, next time maybe if you offer the water. But I was saying, as Irene Mayaka was walking in, we need now to have a framework to deal with those virtual asset service providers. That is why you saw it being very easy for people like WorldCoin and other cryptocurrency service providers having a safe haven in Kenya. And because many of them know that the laws that are there on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing are not strong enough. But now with the enactment of this bill, and when it becomes an act of parliament, we will have a clear framework, regulatory framework that will ensure that nobody ever takes advantage of Kenyans, even for these virtual assets. And nobody can use these virtual assets, because it's also probable that people can use the virtual assets to finance terrorism or even to launder money. So we make it very difficult with this law now for anybody from anywhere around the world to use virtual assets to launder money or to finance terrorism or to actually clean money that has come from criminal activities. During this peer review, Honorable Speaker, it was also noted that the Prevention of Terrorism Act does not have provisions for sanctioning legal persons, and that's why I said with the amendments in this bill, because this is almost like an omnibus bill, because it's amending both the Terrorism and AML Acts of Parliament, we will now have a provision that can actually sanction legal persons, including companies, trust funds, foundations. We have seen, Honorable Speaker, in the past, people obtaining money through corruption, others through criminal activities. And all they do is register trust funds, put the money in a trust fund, or register a foundation. And you have seen even politicians, Honorable Speaker, who run foundations. They are saying they are here. And I am not talking about anyone who is here, so don't feel afraid if you are here. I am speaking about politicians who have registered foundations in their names. And these foundations are ordinarily avenues for money laundering. People loot from public coffers and hide money in trust funds, in foundations, some with very appealing names and very appealing characters of the good work they are doing in service to the people, educating children, dealing with widows and widowers and orphans. But you will find someone who is running a foundation, I don't want to name names, but they are known. And Kenyans know the politicians who have foundations in their names, claiming to be educating vulnerable children or even assisting certain sectors of our health sector, but they are basically avenues for laundering corrupt money. We will make it a thing of the past and impossible for now politicians to use public office to obtain money from public coffers, register a foundation or a trust, then launder money that you stole from public coffers in the pretext that you're offering public goods or public services to vulnerable people. It will now be very difficult, Honorable Zamzam, because I saw Honorable Zamzam getting very attentive when I mentioned politicians, and she's among the politicians who are saying don't mention them. And I'm not mentioning any by name, Honorable Zamzam, so relax. And I know the time you have been here as member for Mombasa, you have distinguished yourself as a good leader.
The Honorable Zamzam has already put a point of order. What is out of order, Honorable Zamzam? Is it because you are...
Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kumwelezea kiongozi wa wengi kuwa asiwe anafanya ile blanket blame, kwa sababu pengine kuna wengine, mimi sina Mheshimiwa, lakini kuna wengine pengine watakuchukulia vingine, pengine they are very straightforward. Kwa hiyo ukisema politician tutafunga ama nini, pengine wako upande huo kwenu tunawajua, lakini pengine wako sawa. So sema wale ambao pengine wanatumia pesa ya umma kuingiza kule, na pengine kama unawajua wataje. Do not blanket blame watu wote ukaweka katika kikapu kimoja. Wajua unaheshimika sana, kiongozi wa wengi, na maneno ambayo yanatoka kwenye mdomo wako yanachukuliwa na uzito sana. Isije ukatoka pale mlangoni ukapigwa ngwala. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Speaker.
Well, Majority Leader...
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Sikujua hiyo kupigwa ngwala ni nini. But Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable Zamzam may not know, I am also very cautious what I say, so I will not name names. But we know political leaders who have foundations, who have trust funds, many, and you can Google those who have foundations in their names. And some have even been accused and charged in court, and it's in the public domain that there are politicians who have held public offices and have looted from public coffers, laundered the money through foundations and trust funds, yet they claim to be offering scholarships to students, and you find a politician who is giving 3 scholarships to students in a year and claims that that is the work of that foundation, yet they use that foundation to launder money from that was stolen from public coffers. I therefore will not be naming any names, as much as I know you know them and they are known, and I need not name any names. Honorable Speaker, the other thing that was noted during this peer review that is being addressed in this bill is that supervisory authorities are not implementing risk-based supervision across the board. And this bill now seeks to ensure that all supervisory authorities implement risk-based supervision. And risk-based supervision, Honorable Speaker, is, for instance, our lawyers, members of the legal profession, who are dealing with clients from all walks of life. And they will be able to analyze your whole clientele of lawyers, or sorry, of clients as a lawyer, and be able to know this is a person who is in public office, this is how much they earn, this is how much money is entrusted to them in that public office. And therefore, if they are coming to conduct transactions or dealings in your law firm that could trigger you to report to your supervisory authority like the Law Society of Kenya or other supervisory authorities, then they will have a framework that they can be able now to report to their supervisory authorities, and therefore based on the risk levels of whoever you are supervising. And this is more so, especially with our professional bodies, the Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Law Society of Kenya, the Association of Bankers, the Association of Insurers in this country, because they all have information that they can be able to help in countering terrorism and anti-money laundering. Honorable Speaker, therefore the bill seeks to provide the following. It will provide supervision and enforcement, cross-border declaration of monetary instruments, reporting suspicious transactions, reporting of cash transactions, raise the cash transaction reporting threshold from USD 10,000 to USD $15,000. It will also enhance the transparency on beneficial ownership, because again, you know, Honorable Speaker, a lot of people have hidden behind companies where we are never able to lift the veil and know who are the beneficial owners of certain companies registered in this country and even outside the country. Therefore, the bill will seek to enhance transparency around the issue of beneficial ownership. We also help in combating terrorism financing, combating, as I said, the proliferation of financing on, for weapons of mass destruction and small arms, and targeted financial sanctions. And of course, as the Honorable Chair of JIRAC mentioned, the issue of mutual legal assistance, making the issue of mutual legal assistance quite easy between countries, because money laundering, Honorable Speaker, and combating terrorism is a global matter and a global affair, and therefore we need very clear provisions on how we can offer each other's countries around the world mutual legal assistance, so that if you commit a crime, whether it's around terrorism financing, whether it is around the financing of around weapons, or whether it is a money laundering act, you will know there is no safe haven anywhere in the world, not in Dubai, not in South Africa, not in the UK, not even in the Cayman Islands, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, because, you know, the Cayman Islands and the British Virgin, or the British Virgin Islands, Honorable Speaker, have for a long time been used, especially by the political class in this country, as safe havens for money looted from Kenyans. The latest being the telecom haste in the last regime. And I must remind the Chair CII and Chair Finance, who are also working on the report on telecom. We need that report board in this house so that we get to know how did people loot a whopping over 6 billion shillings in the last 2 days of the last regime, and scatter away all that money to Malaysia, Mauritius, and part of it end up in the Cayman Islands. Honorable Speaker, it is these stolen national assets, public resources that are stolen by people who hold offices in Kenya and elsewhere, Honorable Speaker, that this bill now will seek to ensure that should you steal, even the Cayman Islands is not safe, will no longer be safe for you. Whether you think you will take your money and cleanse it through what we had, what was called the Pandora Papers. And you've had politicians telling us that in 2 weeks, they will offer us information on the Pandora Papers and how they got to get billions, tens of billions, scattered out of this country. to the Cayman Islands and other British Virgin Islands and other safe tax havens in the world. But 3 years after, we have never had that statement from the same politicians to tell us how they got tens of billions invested out there, yet at times we're in positions of leadership where they were asking other people to bring foreign direct investments into this country. And what a contradiction, Honorable Speaker, that as leaders you're asking people to bring foreign direct investments into your country, and at the same time you're extraditing money and you're telling us it is clean money to the Cayman Islands and other tax havens, including those in our neighborhood. I don't want to name names, Honorable Speaker, but we know them, where people have taken money that is suspected to have been stolen. And Honorable Speaker, because we are enacting these laws to make sure that no corner of the world becomes a safe haven for stolen money, for people who are financing terrorism, or people who are financing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction or small arms that end up killing our people. Honorable Speaker, I want to beg that we all support this bill and ensure that indeed Kenya not only complies with the task force requirements, but is also a safe haven for people who have legitimate and hard-earned money, and our taxes are safe from those who have very sticky fingers to take our money and take it to what they consider to be safe havens using money laundering. With those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Honorable members, I now